This changes everything for the Toronto Maple Leafs as multiple new reports have surfaced regarding Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi's future in Toronto, and what's in these reports will surprise you. So I'm going to break that down in this episode, as well as discuss how it impacts Brad Treliving's plans going forward for the offseason. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we do, if you're a part of the large percentage, about 80%, who aren't subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We produce daily Leafs content, and Darius, a lot of content's going to be coming because tons of things are going down. We discussed some new targets yesterday with Chris Tanev. We discussed the Mitch Marner trade saga that's continuing to evolve. But today, some new reports have come out regarding Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi. And let's just dive right into it. Some interesting ones regarding their future. So this initially dropped yesterday from Chris Johnson. It was a bit of a bomb. It says Tyler Bertuzzi could be willing to work with the Leafs when it comes to the length of his upcoming contract. Quote, even the money, I don't think this is a case of pay me this or I'm out the door. I don't think there's any hard lines being drawn. And all things being equal, Tyler Bertuzzi would like to remain in Toronto. So we're going to start with Bertuzzi. Obviously, a lot of fans thought that he was on his way out of Toronto, that he was going to be getting other, better salaries elsewhere. But it seems like he has serious interest in returning to Toronto, and that's what multiple reports have stated over the past few days, which is a bit of a shift compared to earlier on in the offseason.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicting reports too, because we thought Max Domi was going to be the guy to stay over Tyler Bertuzzi, if not both of them, because it's looking like it probably won't be both of them at this point. But that is still, that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens on Monday. There's a lot of stuff about Domi. We'll get to that in a second. But for Tyler Bertuzzi, I still think he can get way more money on the open market, right? If he does want to test free agency on Monday, he can get like a 6x6 or something like that if he really wants. But it sounds like he really wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, which is incredibly refreshing, and he wants to take a pay cut to stay here, but it has to make sense for both parties, right? He's not going to take a significant pay cut just to stay here. It has to be even. Now, what is even? I'm not sure if it's something like 4.5 or $5 million, but he gets a longer contract. I think the Leafs can get out from under that later on, and that might work right now for the next year or two, maybe 3 years. He's still relatively young. So maybe if they want to do something like that, it might work. So I think he wants to stay in Toronto by all means. I mean, everything we're seeing in the last couple of days, he absolutely wants to stay in Toronto. But if it doesn't make sense for both parties, it's not going to happen. So he's going to have to take a pay cut if he wants to stay here. And it sounds like he does. So it'll be really interesting. He's going to be a fan favorite if he ends up taking a little bit less and staying in Toronto for those reasons.
Yeah, we've been talking about Jake DeBrusk and all these guys, but things are really starting to heat up regarding Tyler Bertuzzi being a Toronto Maple Leaf in when next season starts. And obviously, as things continue to evolve and as things continue to happen, it's going to be interesting to see what they actually do going forward regarding these guys. Because if you think about it, you could have Jake DeBrusk at a decent contract, or you could have, obviously, Tyler Bertuzzi. So it's going to be very, very interesting, and we'll dive a little bit more into it here. So you can see this here. Friedman came out on the Jeff Merrick show and said the Leafs are there on Tanev in a very big way, and that Tanev is the guy Treliving likes the most. But Bertuzzi is likely gone, but the Leafs are still working on Domi, who's asked in the 4x4 range. So now you're looking at Elliot Friedman saying that Bertuzzi is likely gone, but Domi could be willing to stay in Toronto. Like, there's so many different reports, and these are literally from the same day, Chris Johnson and Elliot Friedman. So the good news is, take everything with a grain of salt, obviously, at this point in time. But Chris Tanev, it seems like he is going to be a very, very strong target for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is very good. But focusing on the Bertuzzi stuff, it's a little bit weird this offseason how many different reporters are getting fed different information, whether it's Darren Dreger, whether it's Chris Johnson, whether it's Pierre LeBrun, like anybody. It's been very, very weird how much things have changed regarding that. So you can see here again, this is exactly what he said. I saw reports Bertuzzi might be gone. I've also heard they're battling to get something with Domi. And I mean, Friedman, the reporter, saying he's seen reports is a little crazy, but I don't know. They're both going to test free agency, but at least this report from Chris Johnson, which is newer than the Elliot Friedman one, is pointing to Tyler Bertuzzi returning. But again, until free agency hits, we won't know for sure. But any thoughts on that? And we can get into Domi in a second as well. 4x4 seems to be the number for him.
Yeah, a lot of conflicting reports. And now it's sounding like Bertuzzi's camp and himself is a little more flexible. Like, he would want to stay with the Leafs if it makes sense. And it sounds like Domi's gone the other way, where they're kind of staying on to what they want, a 4x4, right? And as we're recording this, David Alter just came out and said that the Leafs are prioritizing defense. So they're going to look at signing a defenseman first of all on July 1st, and then they're going to circle back to Domi, who really wants and is stuck on a 4x4 deal. So if that makes sense for the Leafs, it's still a reasonable contract with the salary cap going up, and he was still a very useful player. But it's kind of weird to me how the narrative has shifted in the last couple of days, and we don't know if it's true for sure. We're just seeing it from the insiders that Bertuzzi is the guy who wants to come back, maybe make a little bit less on a longer contract, whereas Domi's kind of stuck on what he wants, even though, before they were labeled as the opposite. Domi's the guy who wants to stay. Not to paint anyone as a bad guy, but it's interesting how the narrative has kind of shifted, and it looks like Bertuzzi might be the guy really wanting to stay in Toronto.
Yeah, things just keep shifting back and forth. So you look at Tyler Bertuzzi's stats, obviously 43 points in 80 games, and obviously Max Domi, 47 points, and he's going to be getting a lot less than Tyler Bertuzzi, of course. And you can see here from Darren Dreger, Tyler Bertuzzi super motivated to stay with the Leafs. He feels like he's really good fit there. He's willing to be creative. He is not looking at the $5.5 million on a one-year deal last year. He knows he has to take less. So this is another report indicating that a move regarding re-signing Bertuzzi could be likely. So that's now Chris Johnson and Darren Dreger, but Friedman says he's seeing them moving elsewhere. So it's like, at what point are things going to come to fruition? Probably once free agency hits, they're going to start with defensemen. But I don't know, Darius, it's very interesting. Obviously, we'll make another video on their defense targets. I think Chris Tanev is destined to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, like we said in yesterday's video. But
Nope.
I'll ask you the question, who would you rather have at this point between Tyler Bertuzzi, Jake DeBrusk, and even like Max Domi? Because it seems like Max Domi is the best fit in theory, but according to multiple reports from Chris Johnson and now Darren Dreger, Bertuzzi really wants to stay with Toronto. Whatever reason that is, I guess he just finds himself a really good fit. Maybe he thinks he'd play really well under Craig Berube and that fits really well and that they're close to a cup. And maybe he's willing to take a bit of a pay cut for it, or maybe not necessarily a direct pay cut, but a bit more creative, maybe more term and less money, or less term and more money, depending on what they do.
So personally, based on how things are shaking out right now and the information we're being given, if Tyler Bertuzzi takes a pay cut, but it's a longer contract, I think I'd rather that over Max Domi or anything else. Like Jake DeBrusk, because now there's rumors that Jake DeBrusk wants like upwards of $5.5 or $6 million. That's very expensive for a player like that. So if Tyler Bertuzzi wants to take a longer contract and he gets paid a little bit less, I think I would prefer that, because he was really good in the second half, and I would love to see him under Berube. I think he's going to be a little bit of a different player in that way. So I think that'd be great, because the Leafs can get out from under that later on, and he's still going to be a very effective player for the next 4 years, at least, maybe 5 years. Obviously, he's going to start slowing down. So I think I would prefer that right now. Obviously, I still want Max Domi, but if he's not going to budge from that, it's going to be very difficult to sign him.
Yeah, I think I agree as well. Max Domi's interesting. 4x4 is a bit more than we thought, but it's about where it's in the realm of where we thought he was going to get it, maybe 3.5x4. But if he ultimately ends up getting 4x4, I wouldn't mind if the Leafs got both of those guys, Bertuzzi and Domi. But like you mentioned, maybe they allocate more of their resources to defensemen, which seems to be the way that they're going to be allocating. And then, I mean, they have guys coming up. Easton Cowan probably won't play next year, but you have guys like Fraser, like a lot of players who can come up and replace some of these guys in the future. Whereas defenseman-wise, they're very lacking right now. And that's why I think, like Elliot Friedman said here, Chris Tanev is, I think he is going to be the guy the Leafs target first. I think he might, prediction right now is that he's going to be the first Leaf signing, and then from there, they go on and get a few other guys maybe in trade. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on all this. Do you want to see Bertuzzi back? Do you want to see Domi back? Let us know. Thank you guys for watching.